probably seen him as a columnist at Newsmax, LifeZet, and townhall.com. Dr. Busler, welcome back, sir.
Hi, Paul. How are you? It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really had a blast talking with you last week, and I wanted to have you on again because I'm looking over some of the stuff that Arkansas is thinking about doing, and I know there's a lot of ideas get proposed across the country at a state level, but one of those ideas that we're talking about here in Arkansas is moving away from a gas tax, a traditional gas tax per gallon, and going to indexing our fuel taxes. Can you tell us what indexed fuel taxes are?
Okay, so not all states, most states put a tax on gasoline so many cents per gallon, and they, in theory, use the revenue to help pay for road improvements and infrastructure. So your government officials are saying, look, we raise tax revenue to pay what we have to pay for, but every year, because of inflation, it costs us more to build the roads and the infrastructure. So in order to make sure we have enough revenue to do that, we're going to index the gas tax to inflation. In other words, if you put a 20 cent per gallon tax on gasoline and inflation is 3%, you're going to raise the 20 cent tax by 3%, and you're going to keep doing that every year to make sure there's sufficient revenue to pay the expenses. And that's the theory with doing it. Personally, I think it's a terrible idea. It ends up guaranteeing that you get a tax increase every year, number one, and number two, going back to the theory as to why you need it in the first place, you could argue you really don't need it because if inflation is 3%, then on average the price of gasoline is going to go up 3% also, so you're getting your increase anyway. This is a terrible idea. It's just a way to increase the amount of taxes that consumers pay. And remember, when you put a tax on any consumption, any goods that consumers purchase, if you put a tax on consumption, it's a regressive tax, which means the lower income earners feel it more than the upper income earners. So from that aspect, I don't think it's fair. It's something that's certainly not needed. My vote would be don't do it. The state of Maine had it in, and just recently, because it caused so much problems with consumers, just recently they decided to reverse it and just go back to how they had it before, a certain amount per gallon.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that about Maine. I'm going to look into that. So Maine had an indexed fuel tax system, and they've gone back the other way because it's it's nice for people who want more and more revenue going to the government, and you're basically saying that this is going to enable, it guarantees them pretty much every year an increase in revenue from the people when it comes to paying for gasoline.
Exactly, and it affects the lower income earners the hardest because most of their income goes to consumption. They don't, because they have low income, they can't save a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you put a tax on any products that consumers buy, any consumption, it's a regressive tax, and I don't favor regressive taxes at all.
Yeah, and folks, there's an article at the front page right now at conduitnews.com. It's a report on the task force on tax reform, and while right now it appears it's a net loss of revenue to the government, meaning more money back in the hands of the people, one of the proposals is to index fuel taxes, indexing them based on inflation rates of construction costs, a minimum of current year rate, max at 3% over the tax rate of the previous year. This could really drive more revenue in the long run over the future. So it certainly is a little bit of a red flag, and that's why I wanted to have Dr. Busler on to talk about this so he could explain exactly what this is. And
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. and I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being with us. Good morning to you. Thanks for starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, where we are building a liberty machine. I feel pretty good. I've been on a vacation for a week now, and I was out all last week. Kind of got out of town on Friday right after the show was over. And I don't know if there has ever been more news to develop in that short amount of time. It was a huge news week last week, and I missed it all. And I tried my best to kind of put my phone aside and ignore a lot of stuff, but then I would look and I would see, it kept going. More and more news. And I'm talking specifically about Arkansas politics, more of the national stuff. And it's been stories that we were covering basically, for a very long time. I mean, years. Talking about specifically the corruption, the culture of corruption at the Marble Palace in Little Rock, and it was just this slow trickle. It seems like every single day something would happen. Matter of fact, I've got a list of the top 5 things that happened while I was gone that I'm going to get to at the top of the next hour. And so you want to stay tuned to that. We're going to dive into that, and obviously I'm going to give you my opinion on it. There's some great reporting over at conduitnews.com about a lot of this stuff. And you just go to conduitnews.com if you haven't and read some of the fine, great reporting that's been going on there. I want to thank Jan Morgan. I want to thank Jan Morgan for doing the show for 4 days last week. That was incredible. Joe, I want to thank you because I know a lot of really, if it wasn't for you being here, making sure Jan's signal gets out to affiliates and gets out to the to the Facebook and the YouTube and conduitnews.com, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. And so I definitely needed the break. It was quite a long week for me. You know how sometimes you take a vacation and it goes by like that? That's not the case. Me and the missus actually, I guess we're new parents. We have a 14-month-old, our first, and we actually left her with family. We were very blessed to have that opportunity, and so we were by ourselves essentially, and so everything was the way it used to be, and it was a really, really relaxing time, and so I just appreciate everybody involved, the whole Conduit News team, for allowing me to take a vacation, and Jan did a great job. It was great to see. She certainly has, she had some great camera angles there. She had some great guests. Did you see her whole setup there where she was shooting from? It looked beautiful from a television perspective. Folks, the telephone number 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. We're going to keep the format the same, even though I've got a ton of stuff to talk about. At the bottom of the hour, I do want to go over a little bit about what Rex Nelson, the editor over at the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, he had an article yesterday, and I had a few text messages about it from people, from friends, and it's very, very good about the state of corruption here in Arkansas, about the ongoing FBI investigations. I want to tell you a little bit about that. Then again, at the top of the next hour, the top 5 things that happened while I was on vacation. We're going to definitely get to that. And then at 7:33, we're going to be interviewing Mr. Bill Peacock. Excited to have him on the program for the first time. He's with the Texas Public Policy Foundation. I want to talk to him a little bit about energy and markets. And, he had a great piece over at thehill.com that we'll talk about and get to here in, I guess, about an hour and a half. Okay, here's top headline for me, this morning. Donald Trump is reportedly close to declassifying the Carter Page and Bruce Orr documents. Now, for those of you who don't know, and I can't imagine why you wouldn't know at this point, especially if you're listening to this program, there's a lot of redactions, there's a lot of information that we do not have that exposes, or at least this is what is assumed, exposes the last administration, the Obama administration, essentially whether you call spying on the Trump campaign, or whether you say, trumping up, no pun intended, phony Russia collusion, or whatever the case may be. You have this concept that the Democrat Party and Hillary Clinton paid for a dossier, yada, 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 to get a FISA warrant that was bogus, okay? And so a lot of people are looking into the officials who were at the tops of the FBI or worked for Fusion GPS. And, it is strange that you have Bruce Orr and his wife, Bruce Orr with the FBI, and then you have his wife working for the Fusion GPS that's getting the dossier that is, salacious and fake and everything else. So now we have sources, according to the Daily Caller, sources familiar with Trump's thinking have told the Daily Caller News Foundation over the past week that they believe Trump is close to releasing documents that, previously we haven't seen. Back on September 4th, said he's very seriously considering declassifying the documents. One source told the Daily Caller News Foundation on Sunday that they expect Trump to declassify the documents this week or next. I've come to expect these things to take a little bit more time because it was supposed to happen this week or next and hasn't happened yet. Now, the issue may be that White House attorneys are saying, hey, maybe you don't declassify the documents because that's going to be seen as you trying to challenge the Russian investigation, specifically the special counsel, Robert Mueller, because he's investigating obstruction of justice and maybe this could add to it. I don't buy any of that. I mean, I'm sure attorneys might be saying that, but the American people here need the truth, and yes, the mainstream media is going to continue to ignore it, but the American people need the truth. And maybe it's going to get so bad that the media can't ignore it, right? Christopher Steele wrote a 35-page dossier alleging a vast conspiracy of collusion between the Trump campaign and the Kremlin. Orr is of interest because of his links to that dossier, because of his wife, a Russian expert, Nellie, worked as a researcher for Fusion GPS. Orr was also in frequent contact with Steele before and after the 2016 election. Republicans have questioned why the FBI relied on Orr to funnel information from Steele, a British spy, after the dossier author was fired as a confidential informant just before the election. So what documents might we see? I don't know. But here's some other news. Tomorrow, yours truly is going to be interviewing the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes, tomorrow afternoon. We're not going to. We'll get that interview to you on Wednesday. But so Devin Nunes is coming to Arkansas. It's a closed event. It's a lunch, and Congressman Rick Crawford. It's for Congressman Rick Crawford, and it's going to be going on in Northeast Arkansas. And I'm going to get to interview Chairman Devin Nunes tomorrow afternoon. Really excited about this opportunity to get to do this because it's closed to the press. But after the event, I'm going to have 10 to 15 minutes to interview him. So, by the way, I'm looking for questions, thinking of questions. One of my questions is going to be, are the American people ever going to see the FISA applications? Are we ever going to actually see, demonstrative evidence that and he's not going to be able to answer this, but who knows? I just want to hear what he has to say. Are we ever going to be able to see, was the FISA court lied to, or is it going to be obvious? Did the FISA court ignore? Did they not do their due diligence? I mean, there's so many questions here. But the fact is, Congressman Rick Crawford, he is on that House Intel Committee, which is a very, very, prestigious place to be. And, Devin Nunes is coming, going to give a talk at a closed event. And anyway, we'll be interviewing him, and we'll get that interview to you on Wednesday. Sometime Wednesday morning, we'll re-air it. We'll replay it for you. And I'm going to be there setting up tomorrow sometime. So what do you think about this? Donald Trump reportedly close to declassifying the Carter Page and Bruce Orr documents. I'd love to actually see the FISA application at some point. This is something that makes never-Trumpers' heads explode. They think, I can't believe you would do that. It jeopardizes national security. I mean, not if the Democrat Party paid for a dossier to get a FISA warrant to spy on the Trump campaign or the transition team or whatever the case may be. Of course, there was an anniversary celebrated. Did you hear about this one? There was an anniversary celebrated back on September the 9th. Donald Trump tweeted, "Happy anniversary, #ProudDeplorable." He tweeted to Hillary Clinton's September 9th of 2016 video where she called Donald Trump supporters a basket of deplorables. Remember that? I mean, that was kind of the beginning of the end of her campaign, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure the speech where Hillary Clinton was yelling at the camera, "Why aren't I 50 points ahead, you might ask?" I'm pretty sure that happened after. It's like, those are like nice little bookends. Deplorables moment, and then the meltdown where she comes across like, man, she comes across so strange. If you go back and watch that, "Why aren't I 50 points ahead?" I mean, just, cringeworthy. And then, of course, Barack Obama has reemerged from wherever he dwells. He's reemerged, and, the Democrat Party, they really want to take the House back, right? But this is different than years past. It seems to me that the Democrat Party has a lot riding on this, and it's almost like they're fighting for their relevancy, but it's almost more than that. They're very, I don't know, it's almost like the life of the Democrat Party, the existence of the Democrat Party, their way of thinking. It's like they are, they're putting a lot of stake in this. So they're bringing in Barack Obama, and he has come out and, he's trashing Donald Trump. And by the way, he said that Benghazi was a conspiracy, that there are conspiracy theorists about Benghazi. Yeah, where, Americans died because he wouldn't send help. So President Donald Trump, quotes, Barack Obama talked a lot about hope, but Donald Trump delivered the American dream. All the economic indicators, what's happening overseas, Donald Trump has proven to be far more successful than Barack Obama. President Trump is delivering the American dream, end quote. That, of course, was a quote from Congressman Jason Chaffetz, but you can tell President Donald, I guess I've been on vacation, and President Donald Trump is still, I don't know, he still knows how to troll with the best of them, doesn't he? And then you get this next article here, Benghazi survivor refuses to stand down as Obama attacks Benghazi, quote, wild conspiracy theorists. Yeah. So there was a guy who was actually there at Benghazi. His name is Chris Peranto, and he tweeted, I think, what do they call him? Is it Tonto Peranto? Isn't that what they call him? Benghazi is a conspiracy, add Barack Obama, question mark. How about we do this? Let's put your cowardly butt on the top of a roof with 6 of your buddies shooting RPGs and AK-47s at you while terrorists lob 81-millimeter mortars, killing 2 of your buddies, all while waiting for United States support that you never sent, #scum. This is how people who are actually in the line of fire feel about the Obama administration. I would love a poll. The media is all big about polls, aren't they? They want these polls. Some people have said that they're suppression polls, that they're intentionally skewed, that they were intentionally skewed back in 2016, that they're being intentionally skewed now to get people to stay home and not vote. But wouldn't you love a poll? Maybe they're out there. I haven't actually looked of United States military personnel and how they felt, honestly, and you make it anonymous, I guess. Well, I mean, you don't want anybody you don't want any reprisals, but just how did you feel about your commander-in-chief being Barack Obama versus your commander-in-chief being Donald Trump? I'm just curious. How did you feel about that? I would love to know. I would love. I mean, you would think that would be national news. You know what? That would be something that the mainstream media would want to cover. What's the morale of the troops like? What do they feel? Right? I mean, we always want to be concerned with the troops, right, and concerned with the veterans, rightly so. Well, what do they feel now from one administration to the next? Don't just do Barack Obama. Go back with George W. Bush. How do they feel with that? Comparatively, you'd think that would be an interesting story, right, folks? It's good to be back. We've got a lot of news to get to. We're going to take a break, and the phone number, once again, call or text. Go to Facebook.com/Conduit News as well and sound off about the program. And, again, a lot of great reporting about the events the last week in Arkansas over at ConduitNews.com. Number 870-275-9799. Back in just a moment. And everything else, and so I certainly appreciate that. I want to get your take on, when we had you on last week, Dr. Bussler, we talked a little bit about China and the tariffs and the trade war, and I love how you said, listen, I'm a free market economist, and so when you hear the word tariffs, it kind of makes you cringe. But then you also had some good things to say about the results of some of the negotiating tactics of the Trump administration. Can you kind of refresh us on that real quick?
Yeah. So Trump, too, is a free market person. He would rather have zero tariffs on everything. So he looks at the trade agreements we have, the NAFTA and with the European Union and with China and a few other countries, and he saw that they were all slanted in favor of our trading partners and to the detriment of us. For instance, with the European Union, they make a car in Germany or Italy, sell it.
Do you need conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you. Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions. Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Waiting for justice. When I left on Friday, waiting for justice, that's what the whiteboard says. That's what it still says, by the way. We'll have a new whiteboard for you tomorrow throughout the rest of the week. I mean, it feels like we're... we may still be waiting for justice here in the state of Arkansas and the culture of corruption. I mean, I think there's more shoes to drop from all of this stuff. But I don't know. It's it's just extremely interesting. When you look at somebody text me, let me just say this. Somebody texted me and they said, Paul, you need to go on vacation more often. I took a little small vacation back in June. I think I was gone like Thursday and Friday of 1 week. And then I believe that's when Milton Russell Rusty Cranford pled guilty. And that happened while I was out of town. And then I go out of town on Friday, and Jeremy Hutchinson gets indicted. And then you have John Woods getting sentenced last week. And then you have, what else? You have all these trial documents. I'm going to get to my top 5 things. The top 5 things that happened while I was gone, coming up at 7:05. And I may get to it sooner, but I'm pretty sure I'm trying to save this until 7:05. So certainly let's hold off on that, because I don't actually have a countdown like bumpers made or anything, but I was thinking about it. I just didn't have time to do that. So I guess we have now, what is this? Is this now a header? Hang on, I'm going to click on this. I haven't seen this. This is just now coming to me. Okay, never mind. I thought it was just interesting. So the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette has this, I guess, category on their website now that it says crime in Arkansas. I've never noticed it before. Have you guys noticed it before? Crime in Arkansas. And it, you go down the list here: shooting victim pulled knife, police beat, man held after fight with hospital guards. What is that one? It just says police beat. And then you get down to like former Arkansas senator convicted in kickbacks case, projected affluent ruse. Okay. Wouldn't it be interesting if this category on the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette website, crime in Arkansas, if, how many stories can we get in there at once that are going to be about corrupt Arkansas politicians? How many? And I noticed some people, and this is the biggest news really to me, and I'm going to talk more about this again at 7. I noticed some people want to be the problem solvers now that everybody knows how bad the environment is down there. Conduit News has been trying to report on this for a while, trying to educate the entire state of just how bad it is. And, people scoff. Sensationalist. Really? You can never, nothing we do can make you happy. Well, I said a long time ago, I'd love to talk limited government. I'd love to see, we want, like we said, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. That's what this program is supposed to be. That's our goal and ideal, if you will. We actually want to see these policies implemented. But if you have a government and you have politicians in the party that is supposed to be implementing the conservative ideas that are not honest people, well, we need to put the brakes on trying to implement policy, because you guys will try to make money off of it. You guys will try to make yourselves rich, won't you? And now we have these people who've been around the whole time. They knew all this was going on. They knew people, they were supporting people who they knew were dirty scoundrels, all to prevent limited government people from having a chance, by the way. And I'm going to talk more about this at 7. And, you just think to yourself, my goodness, well, you know what? We've just got to we need honest government, right? And that means, if you're, if you're a socialist, okay, at this point, I'd rather you be honest and just tell me what your ideas are than us trying to weave and figure out, okay, are you an honest Republican or a dishonest Republican or a dishonest Democrat or whatever?
Here in the U.S., we charge them 2.5% tariff. American car companies produce a car here, sell it in Europe, they charge us a 10% tariff. Well, the result of that is we're buying a lot of their cars, money flowing out of the country when we pay for it. They're buying fewer of our cars, not much money of theirs is flowing in our country. we end up with a huge negative balance of trade to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars every year. Well, Trump said we have to fix this. So he talks to the trading partners and said, hey, we have to renegotiate. They're in no hurry to renegotiate. They're in a great position. So, if Trump was a politician, what would happen is they would convene a summit sometime in October. Our people would talk to their people. They'd come back. We'd discuss it for another 6 months. They'd meet again. And before you know it, you end up kicking the can down the road to the next guy, and nothing happens. President Trump says he's a business person. He's not a politician. A business person has to confront problems immediately because it's going to affect your bottom line. You can't have that happening. So Trump wanted to confront this as quickly as possible. You have trading partners who are reluctant to come to the table. So what does a business person do? You create a sense of urgency. So by putting on the tariffs on China, and they're going to hurt the Chinese far more than their Chinese retaliation will hurt us. China's economy depends on selling much of their output to the rest of the world, and much of that goes to the U.S. So if we stop buying their products, they're going to be in trouble, particularly considering all the debt they've used to run this up. Mm-hmm. So we put these big tariffs on, and the idea is let's bring them to the table and come up with a free trade agreement, trying to get as close as possible to no tariffs on anything.
So my next question, we're talking to Dr. Michael Busler. What do you think about economic incentive programs when it comes to the government picking winners and losers, and winners essentially in this case, when they give taxpayer money or incentives to try to bring companies in to quote, create jobs? What are your general thoughts on that economic development idea?
Yeah, this is a difficult issue. Your first choice would be to have an American company come in, build, and you not have to give any incentives. That would be your first choice. If you can't get that, then the next choice is, well, there are companies that are building plants that we'd like to have in our area. For instance, Amazon is building a new headquarters.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
There's so much news. People are on Facebook. We have people saying, I don't know. I wouldn't go so far that it was a conspiracy or anything. But there are some of our listeners on Facebook. Amy on Facebook. It's almost like the powers that be didn't want you to dig the spurs in real time. Talking about all of the news, the indictment of Senator Jeremy Hutchinson. By the way, that would probably be the biggest one. But or there's actually a huge revelation, in my opinion. That we'll get to at 7. First, though, I want to start with this Rex Nelson article. So, Rex Nelson has a opinion piece, State Capitol Criminals. That about sums it up. State Capitol Criminals. Now, he talks about his career as a journalist, his career on the radio, him working with Governor Mike Huckabee, eventually ends up working for the Bush administration. But this is what I want to focus on. The meat of his article starts with the words, "In these dark days." In these dark days, when stories about the depth of corruption in the legislative branch come out on what seems to be a daily basis. Now, I mean, I've certainly been saying that forever. It is a daily affair almost. He writes, "The thing that strikes me is the total lack of respect shown by so many legislators. They've thumbed their noses at the institutions of government, the legal system, and the people who elected them." Well, let's just stop right there for a second. Let's take that first point. The total lack of respect shown by so many legislators. It's also, there's also been a lack of decorum on the floor of the Senate and the floor of the House the last session especially. If you talk to insiders who've been at the Capitol for a while, they will tell you some of the behavior, some of the way legislators are treating other legislators. And I think it had to do, the lack of respect or whatever, I think it had to do a lot with the fact that people knew the FBI was running around. They knew what was coming, and there's people jockeying for power. And when I say people jockeying for power, I really just mean there's people trying to hold on to power. People want to be at the top of the heap. They want to come out unscathed so they can try to somehow lead people, lead the rest of them, get out in front of the parade and say, come over here. Come over here. Follow me. I'll lead it. Even though I've been here the whole time while all the corruption's going on, even though I'm part of the establishment, come over here. Let me lead us to some sort of. And at some point, you would think, I mean, the media is not going to do this, but you would think the credibility of the leaders would be questioned, and maybe there would be a suggestion that there needs to be somebody who has more, who hasn't been part of the good old boy system that needs to be, given the responsibility to lead. I don't know. I just, at some point, the lack of credibility, it's obvious. It's blatant, right? I mean, I've been saying for a while now, the fact that you have what appears to be, a family business. You have. Well, I mean, every time you hear the president pro temp of the Senate, Jim Hendren's name, the governor's nephew, in all the publications, you have Jeremy Hutchinson, who's now been indicted, and we'll get to the specifics of that in just a moment. The governor's nephew, and now, Jim Hendren is the incoming president pro temp of the Senate, which I have said effectively has made the state Senate a state agency, not a legislative body. They're now a state agency because you have familiar relations. You have these family relations, and that is thicker than, the integrity of the body, the legislative body, the separate but equal branches of government. Everybody knows this. And at some point, we have to take stock and say, really? I mean, how did it get like this? How is this allowed to happen? I mean, leading. Well, somebody's a leader. This guy's a leader. That guy's a leader. Leading us to what, though? Leading us to what? I mean, the more the corruption comes out, from what I can see, the more the corruption comes out, the more the toxicity of the environment down there is exposed. There are some legislators that are, you can kind of feel it. They just kind of, how long is it going to take before the people are told by the legislative body, you just don't understand? Isn't that what we're told a lot of times? Well, you don't understand how it works down there. Well, we're certainly seeing the convictions and the indictments. We're certainly seeing those. I mean, is that how it's supposed to work? Is that just part of doing business? Folks, the big revelation of last week, the biggest revelation to me, was that Senator Jim Hendren, according to the documents that Tim Brooks released out of the John Woods trial, that John Woods requested to be bribed by Senator Jim Hendren. Did you see that part, Joe? Did you see that? That John Woods, in the event that the redistricting process was going to put Senator Hendren and Senator Woods in the same district as both Republicans. John Woods wanted $10,000 to not run against Jim Hendren. Now, according to reports, Jim Hendren rejected this and, called some prosecutor, and the government basically said, well, we need you to wear a wire. Well, they didn't ask him to wear a wire, but I don't know if the government ever actually does, but they said that they were going to need an actual recording if they were going to move forward on that. And Jim Hendren did not wear a wire for whatever reason, right? And then Senator Hendren, I guess he didn't file an ethics complaint. And now the same Senator Hendren wants to talk about how, under the new Senate ethics rules, now that everything is basically, exposed and the whole, our confidence in our leaders are gone, he's now the one that's leading. He's the one who's now going to lead and say, you know what, we'll police ourselves and we'll report on each other. We'll report on each other when, you didn't want to wear the wire, you didn't want to make sure. And then on top of that, the good old boy system supported Asa and Hendren and the like, supported John Woods for re-election after knowing all of that. What else did they know? Sounds to me like the establishment would rather support a corrupt Republican than give a limited government Republican that'll stand up to the machine a chance. And that is the reality. That's not speculation. That's just it. It is. You're part of the system. We'd rather have you have your yes vote. And why do I think this all comes down to the $2 billion Medicaid expansion program? Do you think maybe that's what it is? We got court documents now suggesting that John Woods was trying to, he wanted more money. He wanted to use his vote to keep the $2 billion a year program to get a little bit more money for himself. I mean, it is amazing. And, Conduit has had articles about how Asa knew, how the establishment knew. They knew who John Woods was. Everybody knew this guy was, by the way, he got 18 years. Everybody knew this guy was out trying to enrich himself and use legislation 2 years, 3 years, looking down the road 5 years, how he was going to carve out a financial niche for himself, continue to carve out a financial niche. Everybody knew, and they supported him anyway. And it wasn't because, you can't even say, well, they didn't want the Democrat to get elected. In those districts up there in northwest Arkansas, obviously the Republican's going to win. They would rather have a corrupt Republican than a principled Republican. Isn't it obvious? And now we're going to hear from the president pro temp of the Senate talk about how we're going to reform ethics here in Arkansas. Give me a break. You've been there the whole time and did nothing. I think, how long has Senator Hendren been there if you count his service in the House? Joe, can you look that up? I mean, I think he's been down there longer than Jeremy Hutchinson, his cousin. And now that it's all out in the open, now we're going to move forward with reform. I mean, at what point does your credibility, at what point is there new leadership that's required? For the sake of, I don't know, just at the bare minimum, let's the legislative, you've got 1/2 of the government that has essentially been absorbed by the executive branch because of familial relations. I think that was the biggest revelation of the week, was the fact that John Woods wanted a bribe, wanted to be paid off to not run against Jim Hendren in a Republican primary if the two got put in the same district after redistricting. There was a report made by Senator Hendren to the authorities, but there wasn't a wire worn. That's what they needed, according to reports. And as far as I can tell, there wasn't an ethics complaint filed, right? Isn't that unethical? And now we got a guy that wants to say, you know what? Senators will tattle on each other. Senators are going to snitch on each other. Give me a break. I mean, if you have something that black and white and somebody comes to you, by the way, I've often been told that there are some legislators that are never that will never be offered a bribe if they know who you are, like if they know who you are. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, if you're principled, they're never going to offer you that because they don't want to risk it. But if they know, you see what I'm saying? Like there's some sort of, I mean, what kind of security do you have to have? I mean, think about it. Any of you out there listening, what would you have to do, like, if you were to go bribe a public official, or I'm sorry, if you were to go ask for a bribe, if you were to go ask for one, like, isn't there risk in that in and of itself? I mean, wouldn't that cross your mind and be like, I could get in trouble for this? But but not if you know who to ask, right? Not if you know who to ask. You report it to the prosecutor. Say, well, we're gonna need actually more evidence than just your word. I'm not going to wear a wire. What? Really? And then, okay, that's fine. Maybe you don't want to get involved. But then you're going to support him for re-election? Come on. The phone number is 870-275-9799. Back to this Rex Nelson article, real quick. What, is everything okay? Yes. Okay. 12, yeah. You've got the how long has Senator Hendren been in the
he's been a legislator for 12 years total. He spent 6 years as a rep from 94 to 2000, tried to run for Senate seat in 2001 and failed, went back into the military, then came back in 2012 and ran for Senate seat again. I think he was unopposed, got that. And then now he's in the middle of his second four-year term as a senator.
Okay.
So it's 12 years total.
So this Rex Nelson article, they've thumbed their noses at the institutions of government, the legal system, and the people who elected them. He writes, I'm thankful that the FBI is hard at work uncovering legislative misdeeds. I'm also thankful for the work of reporters and editors at this newspaper and other media outlets as they try to shine a light into dark corners of the state capitol. He talks about at the center of the current corruption probe is Milton Rusty Cranford, and he really kind of is the apex here. I mean, you can draw all kinds of flow charts, but you're going to have to put Rusty Cranford's name in the middle. Now, what does Rusty Cranford represent? He's not just a lobbyist. I mean, he represents special interest. And at some point, we've got to understand that special interest is always going to take place, but it's which special interest. And the current special interest, the guys in the shadows, are the real ones responsible for where we are now. That is not to take any blame off of the legislators, because obviously we have, you've got massive character problems here. But it's the special interest. And Rex Nelson does an excellent job of talking about these brokers. Legislators who should have known better fell under his spell. Greed knows no gender, race, or party boundaries. If I ever met Cranford, I don't remember it, Rex Nelson writes. He says, I left the governor's office in late 2005, and he was just a bit player in those days. Cites a David Ramsey study. And then he goes on, while I never knew Cranford, I knew those like him. Listen to this. The obnoxious lobbyists in cheap suits who filled the halls of our beautiful state capitol during legislative sessions. There was nothing sadder than seeing former legislators hanging outside committee rooms while pretending to talk on cell phones trying to appear busy. They were unable to give it up, even though they were no longer in office. Ooh, we see that a lot, right? We headed down the wrong path as a state when voters started electing lawmakers for whom the tiny legislative salary represented the bulk of their income. While the legislature has always had its share of idiots and scoundrels, there was a day when the majority of members had real jobs back home. They were lawyers. They owned small businesses. They ran insurance agencies. They came to Little Rock, did their job, and went home to their families. Want to know why we have so many useless interim committee hearings? money-hungry legislators need the per diems? How many times have I watched them come into the room in casual clothes, sign the book so they can get their money and leave? The answer, too many to count. The games continue after dark as they show up in restaurants with lobbyists flouting ethics laws while foolishly expecting me to believe they're splitting the ticket. Granted, there are still good men and women in the Arkansas legislature. I count some of them among my friends. But in addition to those who committed crimes, there were those who knew bad things were going on and remained silent. In my mind, they are also guilty. Ultimately, this comes back to the voters. We must do a better job selecting the 135 men and women who serve in the legislature. I hope we start this November. Again, that's Rex Nelson, a senior editor of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. That last sentence about those who knew, or the last paragraph there, they knew that this stuff was going on and they remained silent. How many of the ones who knew who remained silent? I mean, good grief. You know, I told a prosecutor about John Woods wanting to bribe. Well, did you hold a press conference? Did you tell the press? Did you tell the media? I mean, you know, come on here. Did you file an ethics complaint? We're now supposed to believe you're going to file an ethics complaint now? I mean, come on, guys. This was huge news last week. I'm going to get to the other news here coming up at the top of the hour, 7:05. All the stuff. The top 5 stories. The top 5 stories that, I wasn't able to report on in real time. I'll get to those 7:05. Then Mr. Bill Peacock going to be on the program at 7:33 coming up today. Oh, by the way, don't miss tomorrow. We'll be interviewing Congressman French Hill tomorrow. We got to take a break. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Guys, let me introduce you to Ken.
And they've looked at a bunch of sites. Each site is offering them a tremendous amount of tax incentives to locate in their municipality. And, of course, the reason is simple. Once Amazon comes with, I think they're looking at 50,000 employees, it's an economic boon to the area. So people say, well, look, if we use some taxpayer money to lure them here, we're going to more than get it back. Now, there's some debate whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but that's the theory. Now, suppose you have a foreign company from China, for instance, looking to build a plant in the U.S. Well, we'd like to get the plant here in, you would say, in Arkansas, so we may have to give some incentives to lure them here. Is it a good idea or a bad idea? Well, as long as the foreign company like China is not doing anything.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, so there's also another little controversy that's brewing down at the Marble Palace right now. It has to do with proper committees hearing proper, issues, I guess. And people want to talk about. I've seen some legislation. We got Second Amendment. Let me tell you something. They want to weaken Act 746. They want to take away your open carry. That is obvious. It is obvious at this point. They want red flag laws. You got these Democrats proposing here in Arkansas, proposing an assault weapons ban. And, gun legislation should be run through the Judiciary Committee, right? Senator Jeremy Hutchinson's resigned, though, because he got indicted. He was the chair of the right. They don't necessarily. Who's the vice chair of Judiciary? Senator Linda Collins Smith. Yeah. Okay. There's a controversy, I think, with, is it Joint Performance Review taking some of this up or studying this? Some people think that, come on, if it's an assault weapons ban thing or even a red flag, I think at some point this is a waste of taxpayer money. But again, you have the per diem situation, $150 a day. Come in, sign, get your $150, leave. Yeah, we're going to talk about that later in the week. Obviously, we're going to have our Patriots of Act 746 segment. Mr. John Calvin Martin will be with us on Wednesday morning at 6:30. So you certainly need to stay tuned for that. Okay, so I'm reading this Facebook here, Facebook post, and we have a lot of really good activity here. Now, think about this. I see that Jackie on Facebook says, in response to our last segment, we were talking about people who've been there the whole time, or people who have, been doing, who have been knowing about the corruption. Maybe they're not guilty of, explicitly crime, but the fact that they were silent while all this was going on makes them guilty. And it was this Rex Nelson op-ed that we were going over. And Jackie on Facebook writes, that's why there has to be a change in term limits. Now, that's very interesting. I think there's a lot of Arkansans that are going to see it that way, right? There's a lot of Arkansans that may see it that way. Now, the other side of things is the people of Arkansas need to do a better job electing those who go down there and represent, and that's true as well. Then you have the power of incumbency. And how powerful is the power of incumbency? It's very powerful. Now, an educated citizenry is indispensable to the proper functioning of a republic. If you had an educated citizenry, educated up on the issues, come on. Your average Arkansan, let's be honest, your average Arkansan knows more about the headlines and the stories going on in Washington, D.C. than they do what's going on here in the state. Period. Now, if they knew more about what's going on here, and then, that would be a strong argument against shrinking the term limits, wouldn't it? It would. But if you look at all the corruption that's in the headlines on a daily basis, and you give an Arkansan a choice between, 16 years and 10 years, I think they're going to say 10 years at this point. And you can make points to counter that. You can make legitimate points to counter that, why that's a bad idea. But I'm just telling you right now, at this point, it is, if the term limits go to 10 years here in Arkansas, the legislature has no one to blame but themselves for getting us to this point. At least that's my strongly held opinion. One more hour coming your way next.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Like to get the plant here in Arkansas, so we may have to give some incentives to lure them here. is it a good idea or a bad idea? Well, as long as the foreign company like China is not doing anything with proprietary knowledge and is not stealing any trade secrets or anything, but if they're coming to build a plant in the U.S. anyway, you'd like to get it in Arkansas, perhaps you can use some tax dollars to lure the company here. So there's no real clear-cut answer whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. It depends on what side you're coming down on. Clearly, you don't want to use taxpayer money to go to a company outside of the U.S. On the other hand, if you can invest $100 of taxpayer money and it generates $1,000 worth of activity with new jobs and the purchasing power that the new employees have, that may be a good investment.
I really appreciate your thoughts on that. I mean, I to be honest, I disagree with the concept of, giving taxpayer dollars to companies to try to get them to locate here, because I think if they can be recruited here, they can be recruited away. I would rather just, eliminate the corporate income tax and things like that, try to treat all businesses equally. Here in Arkansas, it's a strange situation because we have a skilled workforce shortage. And so we have a situation here, Dr. Busler, where existing Arkansas businesses and their tax dollars are going to recruit, whether it's China or whether it's any company, a business to come in here and then be able to hire existing employees away, right, at a higher subsidized wage. And they claim that that's a job created, when in fact that's not a job created. I mean, how many of these jobs are going to be filled by people who are right now on the couch, watching TV? And that's where the rub is how do you actually gauge the effectiveness of this? But regardless of that, I'm a realist. I understand. Look, I may disagree with this, but all states are doing it. Every state out there sweetens the pie and does that sort of thing. So, but my question is this. If you have China and you have the fact that they're stealing $600 billion of intellectual property a year, according to estimates, and then you have this trade war, it really doesn't make much sense to me to do business with China in the state of Arkansas like we are. We are attempting, not just with one, but with 3 other companies. I know one of them may still go through, but the other 3 are on hold because of the trade war. But it just doesn't make sense. And my question is this. If this were Russia, I feel like everybody would, kind of spin out of control if we were trying to cut these deals with a Russian company. But because it's China, it's somehow more acceptable, even though we have the FBI saying, hey, look, we've got investigations into their economic activity in all 50 states. They're stealing from us. They're trying to supplant the United States. What are your thoughts? Is it wise to do business with China given the current geopolitical situation?
Well, I think it's wise to do business with them if we have agreements with them that protect some of the vital interests of the U.S. You made a very key statement there. You said here in Arkansas we really have a shortage of high-skilled labor. If that's the case, there's very little reason to spend taxpayer dollars to bring in companies that are going to take some of the high-skilled labor away from Arkansas companies. The areas that are offering incentives are areas where they have an oversupply of labor and they really need new companies to come in to provide jobs. Based on what you said, that's not the case in Arkansas. So I think the argument for subsidizing Chinese companies to come in and take skilled labor when you don't have enough to go around as it is, I think that argument goes away, and I don't think now it makes any sense to spend taxpayer dollars to bring Chinese companies in.
I appreciate you coming on the program. It's always great to talk to you, Dr. Michael Busler. And I followed you on Twitter after our interview. Did you see that? Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that, yes.
All right, folks,
appreciate that.
It's at M. Busler, at M-B-U-S-L-E-R on Twitter. Follow him. He is an economics professor, finance professor at Stockton University, public policy analyst, and you can see him as a columnist over at Newsmax, LiveZ in town.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. This is hour number 2. My name is Paul. It's the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. It's good to be back for hour number 2. I've been on vacation for a week, and it was much needed, but I am glad to be back behind this microphone. So thrilled. I want to say thanks again to Jan Morgan for guest hosting as well as Joe. Thank you so much, Joe, for everything you did last week in making the broadcast happen and allowing me to take some time off. All right, so let's start at the top. The top 5 things that happened while I was on vacation. The top 5 things that happened while I was on vacation. Number 5, issue 1 was disqualified from the ballot. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. And now, this is a huge development. It's really just going to basically mean for certain that this is going to wind up in the Supreme Court. You had a Pulaski County Circuit judge last Thursday that ordered that no votes be counted for or against Issue 1 in November, in effect disqualifying the proposed constitutional amendment. Essentially, they're saying there's too many issues tied up in Issue 1. Issue 1 is the bad tort reform amendment that I have been railing against. We've been highlighting it's terrible. The Supreme Court obviously will wind up making the decision. I saw some polling yesterday. There are a lot of people who are against Issue 1, and it is a huge blemish, really, on the establishment, the Republican Party establishment that pushed this thing, that did the nursing homes bidding in the wake of bribes from Michael Morton to Mike Maggio. Mike Maggio's in jail for taking a bribe. He admitted to it. And then you have, of course, David Norsworthy sending Jake Files $80,000. He's in the nursing home business as well. And only in Arkansas would you go forward with the special interests after that. But a lot of people have no shame down there. Speaking of having no shame down there, number 4, John Woods and Randall Shelton were sentenced last week. That's number 4 on the list. Top 5 things that I missed. Here is Doug Thompson's piece. Springdale's Woods sentenced to 18 years in prison. Judge was amazed by the depravity of the heart. But what I would tell you is to go over to the Conduit News piece instead, because this is excellent reporting here. Headline, John Woods sentenced to 18-plus years in kickback scheme. It's very, very detailed, really, really good stuff. Some of Judge Brooks' ruling and statements. Listen to this. Judge Brooks condemned Woods at the end of the nearly 5-hour sentencing hearing. He said it was a violation of the public trust and was particularly and uniquely offensive. Brooks quoted the oath of office that John Woods took as a senator, then condemned him for breaching that oath. Brooks stated our republic was built on a very unique 3 co-equal branches of government and on a statewide system where you are one of 35 representing 3 million people. You violated the very fabric of that oath. Other notable quotes from Judge Brooks to John Woods: you stole from the very people that you asked for their vote. This was not an isolated incident. You became adept at it. I accepted face value. You at some point had good reasons and did good, meaningful, and legitimate legislative works. But then he said this: at some point you evolved mentally and thought, I can get juice from the wheels that grind government. Brooks compared John Woods' conduct to playing legislature chess to get around state Supreme Court rulings to keep GIF money flowing. Your top thought was how to get money in your pocket. Quote, you even lied about the little things like the bare bones form for financial disclosure. You developed an attitude that you're above the law. It's ironic that your top constituents were law enforcement at the same time you were stealing from them. Brooks claimed that Wood's crimes bastardized the process of state government. Brooks was extremely upset over the $400,000 Woods steered to alternative opportunities, now preferred family health care, for kickbacks. The money was later returned after being caught to the Planning and Development District. Brooks described Woods' immediate and reflexive response was to find a way to re-steal the money. He said this gave great insight into the depravity of John Woods' heart. Brooks said that Woods did not respect the law because he used his charm to mislead law enforcement while at the same time stealing from them. Brooks said that Woods' conduct showed his mentality had evolved to the point of serious criminal thinking, and Brooks had concerns he would plot and scheme again and needed a strong deterrent. That deterrent was 18-plus years, 220 months. It certainly is and according to my sources in Conduit News, he had no remorse, and that was one of the reasons that this happened. You also have Randall Shelton. Randall Shelton was very much remorseful, according to what I can tell. He got 6 years for his crime as a middleman in this same scheme. Go to the Conduit News article here. Randall Shelton sentenced to 6 years in Ecclesia College kickback scheme. Excellent reporting over at conduitnews.com, and so you certainly want to check that out. Number three thing news story, the third biggest news story that I missed while I was on vacation is the fact that Tim Brooks, in the John Woods case, released hundreds of documents that were sealed that are now unsealed in the John Woods case. And this is a treasure trove that I still don't think we've gotten to the bottom of. Conduit News reporting on this as well. The John Woods trial documents are now unsealed. This happened Friday afternoon, the Friday before Labor Day. Over 500 pages of documents. We know a couple of things. Number one, lots of text communications about Patsy Wooten. Patsy Wooten is the mother of State Representative Janet De La Rosa and executive director of Conservative Arkansas, a PAC that is not really conservative. At one point, a text mentions how Patsy was helping John Woods during the investigation and speculation about her possibly being charged in connection to the John Woods kickback bribery scheme. Discussion about John Woods and Patsy, quote, going on drives and getting away from phones and buildings because they believe the house is bugged. On Patsy Wooten, she was in the room when John talked and clearly knew all. That's the only place John, talked to him or take to him. Her house. If John needs to talk, it's understood that is where. Interesting situations there. Go read that up at conduitnews.com. Number two, former state representative Nate Bell was mentioned. Nate Bell just talked to me and said there is an ongoing FBI investigation about this one that we were discussing today. He said the governor targeted this money for a specific reason. I got the feeling the FBI talked with him. Now, that's a text message that was in these documents. Nate Bell was scheduled to actually testify at the John Woods trial. However, he was never called after discussion about his plans to issue a press release and hold a press conference ahead of his testimony. That was really, really strange. Number three, the procurement process. John Woods and Senator Bill Sample. Quote, there was a special language meeting today that busted up a monopoly that behavioral health had, where they had a monopoly and went around the procurement process. I wasn't there, but thought I'd get the details from Kevin Anderson. Woods voted against getting rid of it, as well as Senator Sample. I was told Senator Sample was vigorous in fighting against changing the process. It was about an $8 million deal. Number four, bargaining chip / private option. Quote, from Micah, these are text messages from Micah, tell Kenny that just because the law John passed didn't get funded, it wasn't a big deal. He was running for another term, and eventually the powers that be would need his vote, and that would be his bargaining chip, just like the private option and the money he got for behavioral health. This seems to show, by the way, a recorded pattern of deal-making to ensure the passage of Obamacare Medicaid expansion, previously called the private option and renamed Arkansas Works. There's going to be more to come from all this, but that's certainly was a pretty big story, and it was the number 3 story that I missed while I was on vacation. Number 2, drum roll please, the number 2 biggest story that I missed while I was on vacation is that Senator Jeremy Hutchinson was indicted. That's right. Senator Jeremy Hutchinson was indicted. Some people have said that he was kind of Al Capone because he wasn't indicted for the things a lot of people thought he was going to be indicted for. He was charged with wire fraud and tax fraud, campaign finance violations, according to the United States Attorney's Office. Counts 1 through 8 of the indictment charge Hutchinson with wire fraud related to falsified state campaign finance reports and soliciting campaign donors with fraudulent intent. Counts 9 through 12 charge Hutchinson with tax fraud for allegedly filing false tax returns from 2011 to 2014. With these charges, Hutchinson faces up to 20 years in prison for each of the wire fraud charges, a fine of up to $250,000 for false tax returns. He faces up to 3 years in prison, a fine of up to $100,000. The release stated that the indictment of Jeremy Hutchinson represents our commitment to vigorously investigate allegations of public corruption by elected officials. Senator Hutchinson allegedly diverted contributions from his Arkansas State Senate campaign to pay for an array of personal expenses. Now, what are those personal expenses? I'm sure we're going to find out a lot when this thing goes to trial. But this was huge. This is, the whiteboard still says waiting for justice. I still feel that way in terms of, Milton Rusty Cranford saying that he bribed Jeremy Hutchinson $500,000 over the course of several years. Who knows? I think that the practice of attorneys taking money and representing clients has got to end as legislators. So let me, that sounded like no attorneys should exist. Politicians who are attorneys cannot take money, for retainer to pass bills for them. That should be illegal, and I would hope the feds continue. Who knows? You know what? There could be another grand jury impaneled, and they could come back and they could charge Jeremy with something else, Senator Hutchinson with something else. So we're going to wait and see on that. Here's the Democrat Gazette story. Indicted on fraud charges, State Senator Jeremy Hutchinson resigns. That's the other thing that happened. He did, in fact, resign. He was the chair of the Judiciary Committee, and now he's resigned effective immediately. A federal grand jury indicted the lawmaker on 12 counts of wire and tax fraud. So he's going to fight. I understand there's a legal defense fund you can donate to for this, for Jeremy Hutchinson. Really? Oh, my goodness. So what would be the number one story, you might ask? What's the number one story? Well, honestly, it's related to number 3. Number 3 was that you have Judge Brooks releasing over 500 pages of sealed documents from the John Woods public corruption trial. Number 1 is a result of those released documents. The number 1 story that happened, in my opinion, in light of all of the corruption that has taken place, that is in the headlines on a daily basis, is the fact that Senator Jim Hendren did not wear a wire or file an ethics complaint against John Woods after a bribe request from John Woods. This was, to me, astonishing. Couldn't believe it. Doug Thompson, back on September 4th, writing this piece that Arkansas senator says former state lawmaker sought bribe. Hendren rejected request tied to 2012 race, files show. So this is a good thing. I mean, it's good that Senator Hendren rejected the bribe request, but this is very interesting. According to these documents, John Woods wanted $10,000 to stay out of the way of Jim Hendren's 2012 Senate race in the event that redistricting would have placed the two Republicans in the same district. Okay? Now, it is Jim Hendren himself who has come out and admitted this because his name wasn't actually in the documents that his name was redacted. But he went ahead, and I think it would have been obvious, right? He went ahead and said, yeah, this was me. I'm the one who, I'm the one who's in these documents whose name has been redacted. Quote, this is a serious allegation which was purportedly made by Mr. Hendren 6 years ago to a number of people with connections to law enforcement, both state and federal, according to Patrick Benka, who is John Wood's attorney. Quote, nothing was done when the purported allegation was made, nor since. Mr. Woods denies the allegation. Mr. Woods is innocent and looks forward to his appeal before the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. Okay. So, of course, we now know he was sentenced to 18 years, John Woods was. So there's a meeting, according to these documents. There was a 2011 meeting where John Woods essentially said, hey, I'm sorry. Let me just read from this story here. Hendren went home after the 2011 meeting with John Woods, discussed the request with his wife, and then called a Benton County deputy prosecutor. The deputy discussed the matter with an FBI agent who told Hendren that a statement would not be enough to prosecute Woods. Hendren would need to draw Woods into another conversation about the offer while wearing a wire, according to the senator's account on Monday. This is what the Democrat Gazette reports Hendren is saying. Quote, they didn't ask me to wear a wire, the Republican from Sulphur Springs said. They asked me if I was willing to. I decided not to wear and push it, but to run my race. They asked me if I was willing to wear a wire. I decided not to wear a wire. Huh. Now, this is, by the way, the same Jim Hendren who is now championing ethics reform, trying to lead the parade, trying to say that legislators will tattle on themselves. Now, listen, I know he went to the prosecutors. I know that. But was there an ethics complaint filed? Did Senator Hendren go out of his way to find, I don't know, to support somebody? Let's say this. I mean, before John Woods decided not to run for re-election, it was clear John Woods was running for re-election, and Sharon Lloyd, Washington County Justice of the Peace, was running against John Woods. She was the conservative choice. She was for limited government. She wasn't the establishment, though. But see, Asa Hutchinson and Jim Hendren supported John Woods even though they knew he was a scoundrel, even though they knew that John Woods was corrupt. They supported John Woods anyway. Folks, that is a huge, huge story. And it shows you a ton of stuff. It shows you that these guys are determined. They want to call, Jim Hendren on Friday before I left for vacation. We played the audio where he, at the Benton County Republican Committee, he compared Conduit to terrorists. That we are like the Middle East nationals that the United States trains, and they put on their own uniform, but then they come in and they blow up, wear suicide vests or fire at their own, at their own people eventually. Yeah, he compared us to terrorists, okay? They are determined to oppose anyone who will not go along to get along with the Arkansas political marble palace establishment. And that is obvious here. That is obvious. That when it came time, I can't even call it party loyalty, really, because this is not what the Republican Party is supposed to be about. I mean, I know it often is because we're talking about corruptible human beings that make the wrong decision all the time, that are bent towards making the wrong decision. This is a big deal. Why didn't you wear a wire? Why wouldn't you want to nail this guy? This was back in 2011. There was still a lot of taxpayer money that could have been saved here that John Woods stole. I mean, my goodness. I bet you John Woods wishes that Hendren had have reported him, because he probably wouldn't be going to jail for 18 years at this point. Or I'm sorry, Warren or Wire. He did report, according to this story. They didn't ask me to wear a wire. They asked me if I was willing to, and I decided not to wear the wire. Why? And, okay, fine. But then why did you and the gang, why were you guys gearing up to support John Woods before he resigned? Why? Why? Somebody tell me why. And it's because you guys thought nobody would ever find out about it. That's the reason. Now, the issue of credibility has got to be looked at here. Republicans, the issue of credibility has got to be looked at here. You've been there the whole time. You've essentially said nothing. You could have held a press conference. You could have filed an ethics complaint. You could have gone public with it. You could have pointed and said, but you know what? That you wouldn't do that, would you? Because, oh, we've got to have party loyalty. I guess it is about party loyalty. You'd be looked at as somebody who's not a team player, right? You might be called, oh, he's you're just angry. Doing the right thing. Exposing the people who are corrupt. You're called angry. You're called not a team player. Senator Hendren, I'm sure he didn't want any of those labels. Those are the labels they reserve for people like Senator Brian King. We got to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment. Talk to you every morning. I want to welcome back to the program. We have Dr. Michael Busler with us. He's a public policy analyst, an economics expert, a professor of finance at Stockton University in New Jersey. You've probably seen him as a columnist at Newsmax, LifeZet, and townhall.com. Dr. Busler, welcome back, sir.
Hi, Paul. How are you? It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I really had a blast talking with you last week, and I wanted to have you on again because I'm looking over some of the stuff that Arkansas is thinking about doing, and I know there's a lot of ideas get proposed across the country at a state level, but one of those ideas that we're talking about here in Arkansas is moving away from a gas tax, a traditional gas tax per gallon, and going to indexing our fuel taxes. Can you tell us what indexed fuel taxes are?
Okay, so not all states, most states put a tax on gasoline, so many cents.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio.
Mm-hmm. They never thought John Woods would get caught. They never thought that their support for him would be a liability. And the mainstream media is going to make sure it never is. You read the rest of this piece, and and it says that Senator Jim Hendren was he said he would testify against Woods in his trial. He told federal investigators August 29th of 2017 he was willing to testify. He was never called as a witness, though. But he said he was willing to testify. More on this Doug Thompson piece here. Woods' corruption case, which also involves State Representative Mike Neal, was the first in a series of indictments involving abuse of grants from the state's General Improvement Fund. Senator Jeremy Hutchinson resigned on Friday after he was indicted. It says Hutchinson and Hendren are both nephews of Governor Asa Hutchinson. Governor Hutchinson played no role in the 2011 drawing of Senate boundaries, as he was sworn in to his first term in January of 2015. We got to make sure people understand that. I guess maybe people are prone to jump to conclusions. Is the fear there? 532 pages of documents. 532 pages of documents released on Friday before Labor Day. Jeremy Hutchinson indicted the Friday before Labor Day. I was out on vacation. Those are the top five. We'll go over those top five at the end of the show again briefly. Coming up, we'll talk to Bill Peacock. Don't go anywhere.
Per gallon, and they, in theory, use the revenue to help pay for road improvements and infrastructure. So your government officials are saying, look, we raise tax revenue to pay what we have to pay for, but every year, because of inflation, it costs us more to build the roads and the infrastructure. So in order to make sure we have enough revenue to do that, we're going to index the gas tax to inflation. In other words, if you put a 20 cent per gallon tax on gasoline and inflation is 3%, you're going to raise the 20 cent tax by 3%, and you're going to keep doing that every year to make sure there's sufficient revenue to pay the expenses. And that's the theory with doing it. Personally, I think it's a terrible idea. It ends up guaranteeing that you get a tax increase every year, number one. And number two, going back to the theory as to why you need it in the first place, you could argue you really don't need it, because if inflation is 3%, then on average the price of gasoline is going to go up 3% also, so you're getting your increase anyway. This is a terrible idea. It's just a way to increase the amount of taxes that consumers pay. And remember, when you put a tax on any consumption, any goods that consumers purchase, if you put a tax on consumption, it's a regressive tax, which means the lower income earners feel it more than the upper income earners. So from that aspect, I don't think it's fair. It's something that's certainly not needed. My vote would be don't do it. The state of Maine had it in, and just recently, because it caused so much problems with consumers, just recently they decided to reverse it and just go back to how they had it before, a certain amount per gallon.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that about Maine. I'm going to look into that. So Maine had an indexed fuel tax system, and they've gone back the other way because it's, it's nice for people who want more and more revenue going to the government. And you're basically saying that this is going to enable, it guarantees them pretty much every year an increase in revenue from the people when it comes to paying for gasoline.
Exactly, and it affects the lower income earners the hardest, because most of their income goes to consumption. They don't, because they have low income, they can't save a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you put a tax on any products that consumers buy, any consumption, it's a regressive tax, and I don't favor regressive taxes at all.
Yeah, and folks, there's an article at the front page right now.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Good morning to everybody out there. I want to remind you that the phone number, 870-275-9799, if you want to contribute to the program. Also over at facebook.com/Conduit News, as well as our YouTube channel. Be sure to subscribe and hit the little bell to receive notifications when we go live. Folks, I want to introduce you to Mr. Bill Peacock. He is with the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and he joins us now here on Conduit News Radio. Bill, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on, Paul.
Yes, sir. I really appreciate you being able to spend some time with us. I noticed that you were, you're a contributor of over at thehill.com, and I saw this article here, headline Markets, Not Renewable Energy Magic. Not renewable energy magic, ensure the affordable supply of electricity. What were you trying to get at with this piece?
Well, one of the things we like to do here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation is make fun of California. They just continue to do things out there that show those of us in the rest of the country, at least the middle of the country, how not to do things. And they've recently decided to go to 100% renewable energy by, I think it's the year 2045 or so. Well, they're heading that way. The Assembly's passed it. Now the Senate has to consider it. And it's just something that is impossible to do. It doesn't work. Even if they could make it work, it's more expensive. And so it's really just a bunch of magic, and we wanted to kind of point that out to everybody.
That's interesting. So by 2045, I mean, is that even possible? I mean, and aren't we really talking about, even if it were possible, there's no way you can do it without the government getting involved here in a massive way, right?
Exactly. That's one of the big issues here is it's just not doable on any kind of large scale at all. But even on smaller scales where people are pushing that way, Texas is about, depending on how you look at it, somewhere in the neighborhood of 18% renewable at certain times. Now, it's really expensive. It relies completely on subsidies. There's federal subsidies, there's state subsidies, and there's local subsidies, and all that money is coming from taxpayers and or consumers.
Okay, so here I'm reading some of this wind energy. Okay, we've heard about wind energy. We've heard about solar energy for a long time. What about the free market? We're talking with Bill Peacock, the Texas Public Policy Foundation. What about the free market, Bill? I mean, isn't that better, especially when it comes to people being able to afford the energy that heats and cools their homes?
Well, that's the argument that folks supporting renewable energy or any kind of government intervention fight against, right? They say, well, markets are great. I'm all for free markets, but markets don't work here. And sometimes that's insurance, and a lot of times it's energy. And they say you just can't rely on markets. So the government, who knows better than the rest of us we have to get in there and we have to figure it out. We have to mandate this and subsidize this and tweak this and push that, and then we can all get it figured out. But it doesn't work. But markets do, and markets have provided lower cost energy and for a long time now. And unfortunately, we're moving away from that.
Yeah, it's the dirty coal. It's the cold, and it's I don't know, hurting the environment and I guess that's what the left says, right? I mean, that's why they want to pour other people's money into technology that's not even ready yet. I mean, I remember Solyndra. I mean, we talk about markets. The only market with Solyndra was you had a bundler from the Obama administration or from the Obama campaign at the top of that company that got the $500 million. And then, they ended up throwing the solar panels, I believe, away after they went bankrupt into a dumpster because it was more economical to throw them away than to continue to store solar panels that nobody wanted in a warehouse.
Well, that's exactly the case. They just keep pushing this in the name of some environmental benefits or cost benefits, but the exact opposite is the case. And as a matter of fact, y'all have that right there in Arkansas. Fayetteville has recently decided that they're going to go 100% renewable. And they said their ultimate goal is to stop global warming, but there's all these other benefits. And one of them, they say, is we're going to reduce transportation and housing costs. But the actual reality of it is it's going to cost a lot more because when you put all these practices in place, it just costs people more.
Yeah, there's wow. Yeah, a lot of people, Fayetteville is, as far as the city goes, this happens in a lot of places where, you have the city that's much more liberal, progressive, if you will, than maybe the rest of the state. But that's certainly not a badge of honor that I'd like to, see displayed nationally in the headlines. We're going renewable. It's like, oh, right. Really? They're going down this path.
They recently, the city joined up with the University of Arkansas to support what was known as the Wind Catcher project, which was going to be the largest wind farm in the United States. It's over in Oklahoma, but it was going to affect Louisiana and Arkansas and Oklahoma and Texas. And the Texas Public Utility Commission got a look at it and said there's no way this is going to be helpful to Texas ratepayers, and they said we're not going to allow it with these numbers. And because of that, the whole project got canceled. So maybe y'all owe us a little debt of gratitude up there in Arkansas.
Yes. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm reading your piece here at The Hill. We're talking with Bill Peacock, Texas Public Policy Foundation. Almost 135 years later, after having moved from windmills to wind turbines and after blowing through billions of dollars of investment in generation, transmission, and storage, i.e. batteries, we are still in the same position. I mean, so is there ever a point where they move on to different ideas, Bill? Or are we still fighting this battle? And on that, what's the current administration looking like compared to past administrations when it comes to this issue?
Well, the Trump administration has done a really good job. They have started rolling back all types of regulations on emissions and other things that didn't help clean the air or anything. It just or help reduce the climate. They rolled back the Obama administration's Clean Power Plan, and so all that is going to produce more electricity, allow the market to produce more electricity at lower cost. There are some talks up there about still needing to help out coal, which is the other side of the problem. And we don't support any subsidies, whether it's coal or nuclear or wind. So we're working through those kind of issues.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I mean, if you really take it from the free market approach, the bottom line is it comes down to efficiency, and it comes down to what's gonna heat your home or power your lifestyle for the lowest cost, and we should be willing to allow the markets to work. I mean, there may be a time where wind technology or battery technology gets to the point where you leave something out in the sun for 5 minutes and you can run your car for a year, but we're nowhere close to that right now.
No, I don't think we're going to be really anytime soon. Wind and solar and biomass, also called wood, are some of the oldest energy technologies in the world. We've been using them for centuries, millennia, and they got quickly surpassed by coal and natural gas and oil because they're just a more efficient technology.
Yeah, I mean, and I see this last part here. The only magic we need to achieve a secure power grid, a secure grid that provides an affordable and reliable supply of electricity, is to make some regulations, mandates, and subsidies go poof, so that generators, grid operators, and consumers can use the market to meet our energy needs. It's really good stuff, and I'm always thrilled to have people who want to talk about the free market on the program anytime, Bill. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. You have a good morning. Folks, it's Bill Peacock. He is the Vice President of Research at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, and he had an article that's up here at the Hill.com. Markets, not renewable energy magic, ensure the affordable supply of electricity. We're going to take a break, going to reset, going to recap all of the stuff that's happened since I've been on vacation. I know we were just talking about it, but I know we have new listeners right now who are just taking their first sip of coffee. I'm going to refill my cup and be back here in just a moment.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
At conduitnews.com. It's a report on the task force on tax reform. And while right now it appears it's a net loss of revenue to the government, meaning more money back in the hands of the people, one of the proposals is to index fuel taxes, indexing them based on inflation rates of construction costs, a minimum of current year rate, max at 3% over the tax rate of the previous year. This could really drive more revenue in the long run over the future. So it certainly is a little bit of a red flag, and that's why I wanted to have Dr. Busler on to talk about this so he could explain exactly what this is and everything else. And so I certainly appreciate that. I want to get your take on, when we had you on last week, Dr. Busler, we talked a little bit about China and the tariffs and the trade war, and I love how you said, listen, I'm a free market economist, and so when you hear the word tariffs,
money, power, prestige, essence, available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From Zenata Rhino Collection. The fragrance of backroom deals. Nepotism. The aroma of higher taxes. Subliminal deception. Deep state. Ace. Made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Yeah, this broadcast will be available over at conduitnews.com. We'll have the show cut up for you as well over at the YouTube channel with that interview with Bill Peacock, as well as probably my opening segment this hour where I went over the top five news stories that I missed while I was on vacation for a week. That's right. Number 5. Issue 1 was disqualified for the ballot. Number 4, John Woods and Randall Shelton were sentenced. John Woods got 18 years. Number 3, Judge Brooks released over 500 documents, unsealed them from the Woods trial. Number 2, Jeremy Hutchinson was indicted. That was a big story. And the number one story that I missed while I was on vacation is that Jim Hendren, that John Woods requested a bribe from Jim Hendren and then didn't wear a wire or, to my knowledge, file an ethics complaint against John Woods after, and matter of fact, he supported him for re-election. or him and the gang did. I mean, the monolithic. I mean, Asa supported him. Asa threw him a fundraiser. Interesting. Jim must have not told Asa, I guess, about the John Woods trying to get a bribe in case they were, put in the same district together and forced to run against each other as Republicans. Interesting, right? Yeah. Yeah, so those are the top 5 stories I missed, and there's actually more to come. I mean, there was some interesting stuff. Conduit for Action had a story over there about Dustin McDaniel. That was interesting. Check that out. I'm sure we'll get to that in the news. Here's the last little story, though, on this whole thing. You see, as the wheels of government turned and as the news cycle turned last week, eventually John Moritz wrote this piece about how legislators react to senators' indictment. And they have a quote in here from Senator Jim Hendren, who, by the way, is now trying to lead on ethics when he was offered a bribe, when he was asked for a bribe, and he reported it to authorities but decided not to wear a wire like the FBI wanted him to, from what I can tell, from what the story says. And, again, they would rather have a corrupt Republican than they would an honest Republican. Let me say that again. They would rather have a corrupt Republican in office than a principled, honest Republican. It's easier to make deals. That is obvious at this point. Oh, and by the way, Conduit News, we're terrorists because we're telling you the truth. So Senator Jim Hendren is quoted as saying, "It's no secret that we've got a problem." All right, thanks a lot. That's, come on. Captain Obvious. It's no secret we've got a problem. It used to be, though. Oh, yeah. It used to be a secret. Just like it used to be a secret that John Woods asked you for $10,000, and it used to be a secret that you didn't wear a wire when you reported it to authorities because you just wanted to run your race. He's quoted saying, "I just wanted to run my race. I decided against wearing a wire." Why? Okay, fine. Well, why did the establishment? Why were they ready to support John Woods over Sharon Lloyd, Washington County Justice of the Peace? Why? And now you want to lead a Senate effort to put in new ethics rules over the Senate that require them to tattle on each other if you can't file an ethics complaint against John Woods, you can't. No one's going to ever file an ethics complaint on anybody. Let me say that again. If you can't file an ethics complaint against John Woods, you'll never file one against anybody. Because I don't know if you can get much worse than what John Woods did. Or let me just say, I don't know if you can get any more notorious than John Woods. He was notorious. Everyone knew he was doing things that were ethically questionable to enrich himself, if not outright illegal. And your cousin, Jeremy Hutchinson, who's now indicted, everybody knows he's been taking money as an attorney through the loophole forever. There's nobody that's going to file an ethics complaint on him. I mean, you did have Linda Collins Smith try to write legislation, or she did write legislation trying to say, hey, we're going to close this loophole. And you know who went back and forth with her on the Senate floor? Jeremy Hutchinson. No. You don't need to do this. But you know what? They'd file an ethics complaint. That's exactly right. I just got a text message. They would file an ethics complaint against a conservative like that. Somebody who is voting for limited government, voting against the special interests. If they stepped out of line for an instant, they'd file an ethics complaint immediately. But not against John Woods. And now Senator Hendren is going to lead the ethics reform. Yeah. Look, I'm definitely partisan. I mean, I'm definitely got my opinion. But, there's people that listen to this show that Well, there's some liberals that listen. I don't know why, if you're a progressive liberal, you would listen. I mean, it's torture. Don't let me ruin your day, okay? But I'm sure there are people that listen to this show, I mean, that don't agree with everything I say, or that maybe are for big government or, microwave communism, socialism, whatever. That's fine. Who want to know what the right is thinking. Well, to those people who are listening, my question would just be this. At what point, if you've been down there this whole time and said nothing publicly, at what point do you no longer have credibility to lead us out of the muck? What would it take? I mean, what would it take for you to lose credibility as a leader when you've been down there the whole time in the midst of it? I mean, are we really to believe that the uncle and the nephews and that it's all that somehow, they're all, they're above the fray, and there's been some voice of reason in the establishment the whole time, but that's been saying, no, we need to do the right thing. We need to do the right thing. Certainly haven't been doing it publicly. And now you want to lead and take the ball, get out in front of the parade, claim that you're fixing the problem. It's no secret that we've got a problem. Yeah, okay. That's it's just at what point? That's the question. At what point would you lose credibility? And I think the media needs to ask this question. The media needs to ask this question of these future leaders. At what point do we not? They started to. I mean, some of the mainstream media started to when Senator Hendren had the gaggle of senators at the press conference right after Jeremy Hutchinson was implicated in the $500,000 bribe, in the Rusty Cranford guilty plea, and the reporters were very skeptical. And they were asking, well, are you having this press conference and talking about ethics reform because of Jeremy Hutchinson? And they stood up there and said, no, we're not. What? You're not? I mean, that they still want to protect. They still want to protect the people that are obviously guilty of betraying the public's trust. And they would say, well, we want to make sure attorneys can still be legislators. I mean, we don't want to go too far. Maybe it's time to go too far and then back it off a little bit later. Maybe it is time to go too far. I mean, I'd rather go too far in limiting the government's power than not go far enough, wouldn't you? I mean, at this point, look at this. Look how your average Arkansan is completely disengaged from this whole scandal. Right? They only do something when the Marble Palace bubble is shocked, They only really start to react when there's the chance that a bunch of their constituents are going to find out how bad it is down there. If your friends are not listening to Conduit News Radio every morning, or if they don't get up as early, they can always go get the podcast. They can get the YouTube video. They can get all the stuff. Go to our YouTube channel, please, Conduit News, and go ahead and subscribe to the channel and click the little bell to receive notifications. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll see you back here tomorrow morning, but I've got big news. Tomorrow afternoon, yours truly will be interviewing the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Devin Nunes. He is coming to Arkansas. It's a closed event to the press, but I have been, thankfully, just graciously been granted an interview. Really excited. He's coming to Arkansas because of Congressman Rick Crawford. They're having an event, and it's pretty fantastic that Rick Crawford is on the Intelligence Committee, and it's going to be a great time. I'll have more on that tomorrow, and you'll get to hear the interview with Chairman Nunes online. If not Wednesday morning, you'll get to hear that interview sometime Wednesday morning. Okay, folks, we got to go. Arkansas, be safe. Have a great week and a great day.